music, it's unknowable. And as we just saw, it can be a little bit sexy as well. That dance between two ships, that tango, has been the subject of video games since one of the very first, 1961's Space War. As you can see here, it's being played on apparently one of the computers from Vault 101. Since then, that dance has stayed with the space simulation genre, but the scope surrounding it has expanded almost infinitely. One of the creative minds behind that expansion is here with us today. Its credits include Wing Commander, Freelancer, and a game that has been crowdfunded for 50. Look, the point is, it's a lot of money. Please put your hands together for Chris Roberts. Also joining us today to his left, yes, that's a lot of hair, but no, it's not a man in a Kilrathi catsuit. It's Nathan Cox. To his left, it's our beloved, wise, old space mentor, Seamus Byrne. Finally, to his left, the man most likely to have his star citizenship revoked, Joe Gilroy. Space Sims was something of a technical powerhouse back in the 90s. We thought of them as this grand-scale vision, the way we think of something like a Skyrim today. They've kind of dropped off the radar since then, but we are seeing a resurgence, thanks to people like Chris and games like Star Citizen. I want to ask you, Chris, what is it about space as a setting that keeps you coming back?
The endless possibility. I think the optimism, the idea that you can go anywhere and do anything, which I think also correlates very much to sort of, if you're a PC gamer, that's sort of the way you think, because you can always can make my machine better or quicker or faster. But yeah, for me it's just the idea that there's no boundaries and whatever you imagine, pretty much you can do. And I think in general, science fiction in space represents optimism, which I think is a human feeling and primary urge. So.
Optimism in the fact that we might actually get there in the first place one day.
Yeah, well, just the fact that you could do anything or anything could be there, or there's something around the corner that could be great, or I mean, just it's just the idea that there's a completely open universe that is there for the exploration and the adventure.
There were limitations, though. One of the first games that you worked on in the space genre was Wing Commander. Nevertheless, Wing Commander was quite revolutionary, and it defined what the space combat sim can be. It featured open pockets of space, complex mission objectives, branching storylines, and animated briefings in between missions. Looking back on Wing Commander today, do you still feel that it is a solid foundation for what you envisioned a space sim could be?
I don't tell you. I mean, Wing Commander is probably the one game that I look back at. There's a couple that are like this, but there's definitely the game I look back at, and I would not change anything about how I made the game. Obviously it's much more primitive technology and computers and everything, but in terms of what I felt the game should feel and be when I was making it, that's what the game was. So I've very rarely, games normally are much more of a sort of ordeal and a process, and they're iterative, but in the case of Wing Commander, it was a game when I was making it, the vision I had in my head sort of just happened. There was very little drama to it. So for instance, like a good example is that normally when you build all the missions and you balance them, and sometimes this mission's too hard, you've got to change that. Wing Commander 1, every single mission in Wing Commander 1 was exactly the mission we designed on paper. So we didn't actually go in and tweak or change any of the numbers on the ships, on the missions. It was sort of all that came in, first draft, and it just worked. And when I was making the game, people that were working on other games in Origin were playing Wing Commander in their spare time in the sort of alpha beta stage, and that's kind of when I knew, I think there's something here. But for me, it's one of the few games that I look back at and I go, okay, for what I was doing, I wouldn't really change much.
Is there an element of the fact that this is one of the first times an intense cinematic space sim had been created to this degree? The fact that you didn't need to go back and change anything because there wasn't a bar to compare against?
Maybe. I think the biggest thing for me, and I think this is true for a lot of the games that I do, definitely what I'm going to do, what I'm trying to do with Star Citizen is that for me, a game is sort of a feeling, it's an emotional experience or response. So like when I make a game, I sort of think about how I want to feel when I'm playing it, and I picture this, I have this feeling in my head, and I have this picture of what the game's going to be like, and that's pretty much drives most of the games I make. Definitely Star Citizen is something that's like that. But that was with Wing Commander, and so I think the thing that probably helped, made Wing Commander feel different than others, it was very much about the emotion of it and how it would feel, like the feeling of sort of being this hero in this space war and making a difference, and not so much about a high score or, can you clear these missions or can you kill these different aces and get to this level. It was just really about, can you make it through to the end of this story and win the battle, win the war for the Confederation. And so I focused very much on sort of the feeling of it, the emotion of it, and I think that was different for games back then, especially these kind of games. I mean, say the adventure games had a bit more of that, but sort of the kind of more action or sim games didn't really focus on the emotional journey or the feeling that you would get as you were playing it, being in the world, how that would feel. And I think that's what sort of set Wing Commander apart back in the day.
If we can cut back to the box art there for a second. You're one of the few developers, along with I think Sid Meier and American McGee, to have your name on the box, a Chris Roberts game down in the bottom right corner. What does that do for you as a brand, sort of attached to this kind of a game? How does that influence the way you work and the way you think the game is perceived?
I think it's sort of, in the old days, it was a Chris Roberts game, there wasn't really anyone else working on the games. And then as time went along, there was a few, Wing Commander 1 definitely wasn't just me, but it was actually a relatively small team. So the very first year on Wing Commander was entirely me, and then Dennis Loubet, who was one of the artists that worked at Origin, did some of the prototyping art with me, and then in the last 6 months of it, I think we had 3 or 4 programmers help out, and there was about 3 other artists, but it was a much smaller scale than you would do in today's world. Now, obviously, it's huge teams. Star Citizen has 280 people working on it. Not all of them are on staff, but it's a huge team. So I'm sort of more the leader. It's not there's definitely, you see great stuff in Star Citizen. That's a lot to do with the fact that I've got an incredibly talented team doing it. I'm sort of providing direction and leadership, but it's not me building the spaceships, it's not me doing the sound effects and all the rest of things. So I think historically, in the old days, it was much more a sort of solo artist kind of setup. Definitely, I was at Origin, Richard Garrett had the Lord British moniker, and it was Lord British production, and so it sort of seemed a natural thing when there was less people, and then of course it becomes a bit of a brand. Which isn't a bad thing, because it sort of allows you to get to make the games you want to make. People go, okay, well, you want to do a space game, Chris? Then okay, cool, because you like the ones you've done before. But so I think to some extent, in today's world, maybe it allowed me to be able to do what I did with Star Citizen. Whereas if I'd come up a little later on and been part of sort of a big sort of publishing machine inside EA or Activision or somewhere where you don't necessarily, they don't focus so much on the individuals involved in it, I probably wouldn't have been able to, have the enthusiastic support, which I think there's a lot of people in this audience that buy that. So thank all of you out there, by the way. To make the game that I love making, and I do think that, I'm guessing most of the people here love these kind of games too. So
I would hope so, otherwise it's not the place. After Wing Commander 1 and 2, you branched out into Wing Commander Privateer. This was the beginning of the elite style influence, an open galaxy, and an introduction of trading as one of the primary mechanics. Talk to me about how much elite influenced what you wanted to do with the space sim and how that manifested in Privateer.
I'm a big Elite fan. I grew up in England, so the very first Elite was on the BBC Macro, which is where I made my first games. I played Elite back in '84. I think my first. I had games that were out like '82, '83 on the BBC and '85. So I was sort of making games, and I was incredibly impressed by the scope and the scale that Ian Bell and David Braben managed to put into the very first Elite. So there's definitely that. Before Elite, I'll say that there's, I used to be a big role player. And so I played Dungeons and Dragons, and there was another game called Traveller, which was a sort of science fiction version, if you want to call it Dungeons and Dragons. So I used to play that a lot, and that had a whole bunch of the same aspects that I think Traveller sort of influenced the Lead as well, and so it's sort of all circular, where I sort of saw those aspects, and I thought, yes, having this sense of an open world and being able to go around and trade and sort of not necessarily be so linear and be able to sort of have this upgrade path at your own pace, adds a lot more to the sense of sort of connection to the world. And so it's something that I've sort of wanted to do. The first Privateer was a game that we built sort of in between Wing Commanders, and so I didn't get to do as much of the technology as I wanted to do because we didn't have the time to do it. Freelancer was going to be a game that had much more of the big vision, but I didn't combination of technology changing, moving from software to hardware rendering, and technology not quite being there, and sort of didn't allow Freelancer to get to the level that I kind of originally dreamed it was going to get to. And then I also got slightly burned out dealing with the sort of bigger corporate structures that at that point in time I had to deal with. So for me, sort of Star Citizen's finally getting to fulfill this living, breathing universe dream that I've had for, ever since I saw Star Wars as a kid, as 8 years old, and I'm like, I want to live in that world. And so that's I would say being a pretty big driver of the games I've made.
Speaking of Star Wars, let's move on and watch a little trailer from one of your next games.
Welcome to the TCS Victory Tower.
Thank you, Captain. What would you aim for if you had the biggest guns?
Never let it be forgotten. It is when the foe is near vanquished that he is most dangerous, my friends.
Plants planet after planet and breed the galaxy of Kilrathi. Listen, you can't force me. I'm like this on piece of the action.
Rather crash and burn than make a commitment.
But this is war, Lenny. All of us have lost someone dear to us. That does not make you special.
Which the heart of the tiger continues to jeopardize.
Launch all fighters into battlefield.
People die all the time. We are winning the war, Your Majesty.
You still have time.
Damn it, man, you put your own needs above that of the ships. You can't ever do that.
I think you guys probably didn't die in the point across. fact, we haven't been shore leave in months. In fact, all we do is move from one defensive mission to another. In fact, our entire force is constantly in retreat. Now, is that just my imagination, or is the entire war effort unraveling before our eyes?
Fight well, Captain. The struggle will only get harder.
There's a hell to go to. I know they've got a special place reserved for me.
Hey, I'm not taking my ship.
Sir, what are you doing? You're heading right into their fleet.
We'll take as many of them with us as we can. Think your peace was hard.
You went from the open, expansive universe of Privateer back to attempting to tell a more cinematic story. And you worked with a number of Hollywood actors, Mark Hamill, Malcolm McDowell, John Rhys Davies. How does it change the way you produce a game like Wing Commander? What does it mean for a space sim? And how do you convey to these Hollywood people what it is you're trying to do?
Well, you know, it's funny, so when you work with actors, you know, there's a whole, you know, normally in a computer game, if you're building something, you know, an artist, you're like, okay, I want to do this, and the artist comes in and they build a certain aspect, and a lot of times they'll add to what you've directed them to do. And the same is definitely true for actors, because you sort of you have the script, you have the story, you sort of tell them, okay, this is kind of, you know, where you are inside this you know, story arc. But really, if they're a good actor, which, you know, we had some pretty good actors on Wing Commander 3 and 4, and just in general, they act, they bring a whole another level of sort of backstory and emotion to the role. So it was a lot of fun for me. I mean, it was really great to sort of see people inhabit these roles that before, you know, we were just doing this 2D art and, you know, subtitled lines of dialogue on the bottom. So it was, and it felt to me it was, you know, we're not doing it for Star Citizen because the technology's changed now, so we sort of feel like we can do stuff in engine that puts you in the world and connects you emotionally. But back in the day here, it felt like you were either going to do something that was sort of Saturday morning cartoon, primitive animation level, or you could film with actors to bring a level of emotion to the gameplay. So I'm connecting back to emotion, which I was talking about Wing Commander, that you couldn't do otherwise. And that was kind of the reason to go with live action, to sort of have you connect to these different characters. And you know, I think people have really responded to that.
What happened to interactive movies the way you envisioned them? Where are they today? Where have they moved to within the gaming space?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, like, I think Naughty Dog are probably one of the prime proponents of the, you know, for what I see as some of the best interactive sort of storytelling experiences. The Last of Us, I think, was probably the shining achievement of the last generation of consoles and sort of narrative. But it's for me, you know, it's those kind of games which I think we've now, you know, people have moved from live action to, you know, motion captured, performance captured actors, but you know, you're still getting actors to deliver the performance. I mean, even if, you know, people are running around and just, you know, the motion sets are all generated by actors. People are reading the lines of dialogue, but it's all in sort of it's the support of, you know, creating characters in a world that you sort of can see yourself in and you can relate to.
We spoke briefly about Freelancer, but I just want to go back over one particular aspect. What are some of the learnings that you took away from it that you still feel apply to your work today?
Well, I guess, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but in terms of the level of scale and ambition, I think that at the time, I was trying to do something more than the technology was allowing.
Your original vision for this was in 1997, if that's correct.
Yes.
This is about 6 years before EVE Online existed, before anything like World of Warcraft existed. I can understand how that would happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think actually someone on our forum, someone dug out an old GDC speech from '97 where I talked about a persistent universe that would dynamically change and the players would affect it. And that was all stuff that, I sort of could see what was happening with Ultima Online, and I really wanted to try that idea of people playing in this sort of online universe and having actually a cause and effect on it. And it was harder than I expected it to be to achieve some of that stuff, and it's something that was one of the big reasons why I sort of came back to games to come and do Star Citizen, was I sort of finally felt like, you know what, based on everything I can see and where the world is, I think I can sort of deliver that experience I dreamed about, whatever it is now. It's not quite 20 years, but 17 years ago or so.
Well, that leads us very nicely into Star Citizen itself. I need you to explain to me what this game even is, because it's being released in such a fashion that I've never seen before. You have a number of modules that are separate but interconnected, and they are producing entirely different experiences within each of them. Give us the top-level overview. How does Star Citizen work, and how do these modules fit together?
Well, I wish there was actually a fan video, which I was thinking about. We should play, which actually did a more eloquent job of describing the idea of Star Citizen, which is essentially that you can sort of go anywhere in the universe, within the universe we're building, of course, not necessarily anywhere, period, but you can play you can be who you want to be. You can be a mercenary, a merchant, you can be a pirate, you can be a bounty hunter. If you want to just do salvage, you can do that. If you wanted to take information from point to point, you can do that. If you want to be a miner, you can do that. So it's sort of a game that is based around the possibility of what you want to do in this universe to sort of make a credit and get ahead. And you can travel between different planets. You can find missions or buy things on a planet and go to another planet and sell them. Along the way, you may encounter people that want to prevent you from getting there, take things from you. You'll have to fight them off. And it's sort of a world that's dynamic and lives, and it's big and it's complicated. And if I was going to take a look at normal games, I would say that we're probably packing about 4 or 5 sort of normal, whatever you want to call them, AAA games into one, because we have the space flight combat, which not only is sort of what you traditionally know, which is sort of flying around a single seater, but there's sort of what we call multi-crew, which is you and your friends can be manning bigger ships. Someone flying, someone in the turret, someone on the communication station, someone down in the engine room. So you have all that out in space. You can also sort of EVA, go out of since it's all a complete first-person simulation, you can walk around the ship on foot, which generally has not really happened in any sort of space sim before. You can go outside, you can EVA onto another ship. If you want to board them and take it out, you can blow open the airlock and go in there and take the ship out. So there's a sense of range you can do in space, and then same down on the planet side. When you land, you're wandering around in first person. You can meet people, get missions, buy, sell stuff. Upgrade your ship, repair stuff, get encounters with NPCs that may be hostile to you, and it's sort of an open world. So and on top of all these things we have, which is sort of a first-person shooter and a sort of space simulation and a trading sort of 4X game. We also have a single-player story, which is a whole Wing Commander narrative arc, which in some ways is bigger than pretty much anything we've done on a Wing Commander before, that will sort of lead you into this universe if that's the path you want to take. And I sort of realized early on when we were developing the game, and the way that we'd had it, we'd had such great early support for the game, that the level and ambition of this game is not something you can just say, okay, great, we've raised this money and I can come back in 6 months and you can now play it. So and when we were doing the initial crowdfunding campaign, the level of enthusiasm and support from everyone that backed it was really invigorating. And I was like, okay, I've got to find a way to constantly engage everyone that's backed this game so they can sort of see how it's going and themselves actually touch it and give feedback. And so originally we'd sort of pitched, okay, here's the game, we'll have a multiplayer dogfighting test bed for you to play, and then you'll be playing the final game, starting with like the alpha and the beta. And I sort of realized, well, there's going to be some pretty big gaps between those milestones. And so we said, you know what, this game's pretty discrete. You've got the space area, you've got the stuff down on the ground, on planets, you've got the FPS stuff. And so we started to look at it and said, okay, well, let's break this up into modules, like discrete bits of functionality that we can share with everyone that's backed the game, and they can play it, and they can give us feedback. And we can make it better and iterate it, because the most difficult thing in making games is you go and make a game, and you tend to make it in isolation. So you make it using all your instincts to say, okay, I think this would be the best game. You and your team work really hard to do that, but sometimes it can be a little myopic because you're kind of in your own little bubble, and a lot of times you'll bring out a game and you hope everyone likes it. When you see if it gets good reviews, that's great, and you sort of see some of the feedback, you can't really act on it until if you're lucky enough to do a sequel. And so in the past, generally, I've sort of changed things on the sequel as well. In this situation, getting modules or sections of the game out early, people can play and give feedback, and we can iterate it and make it better. And so that's kind of the vision on Star Citizen, which makes the development a bit different than anything else I've done. And I would say it's different than a lot of other, pretty much most things out there, where the community that's backed it participates and is involved in the development of the game. And not necessarily like they're specifically programming things or drawing the art, although we have some pretty talented people in the community that actually do a bunch of stuff for the game. That I'm always surprised like how resourceful and great everyone is on that. But they're able to sort of voice issues or concerns or ideas to make things better, and we're able as a team to sort of take them on early to constantly iterate. And I think ultimately that process will make a much better, more polished game. And we've got hundreds of thousands of people now, so when we launch, I don't think we're going to have the same issue that you've seen with other games, and they're big multiplayer games, and all of a sudden you launch and there's all these problems with the servers and the back end. It takes a while to fix out, because those are things that we're literally going through now. And we are, every time we deliver a patch, it's like we're launching sort of a game. And it allows us to iterate. So, for Star Citizen, we're going to have a patch that comes out a little later on. I guess, I don't know whether it's early hours in the morning, Saturday Australian time. It's coming out in the middle of the day American time. And that's our V0.9.2 patch for Arena Commander, and that has a whole bunch of flight control changes and targeting changes, and a lot of that's based on people playing it and kind of their feedback and what's difficult, what's hard, and we've spent a lot of time taking on feedback from people and also our own sort of playing it to try and make the game feel as good as possible. And because we have this process that we're using, we're really, I think, able to sort of hone it in a way that I wouldn't have been able to hone it in the past. And so I love that. I love that process. I think the team really likes that process. And so I kind of look at Star Citizen as a journey that people are taking now all the way. And so by the time we get to version 1.0 of the full game, of course it's an online game, so it's never really going to be done. I'm hoping that people that have backed it have really had a great time sort of seeing how we're building it, hearing from us how we're building it, playing the various aspects, that playing in the final game is like a bonus for them, and they sort of feel like they've gotten their value for money just by getting to that point. And I do think because Star Citizen in some ways is a shared dream, right? So it's a dream that I had, but it's a dream that like pretty much everyone that backs it. So it has this idea of, okay, I want to play this game and I can do all these different things. That is kind of fun to sort of see the dream shape as you go along and be involved in it. And so that's what I think makes Star Citizen special, and the ambition of it, right? So, because it's not, I think that's the other thing, is that there's not many games that are quite that ambitious. I definitely know several, people do say, well, you're a bit crazy to try and do all this stuff, but, I kind of feel like you got to try for it. I mean, if that's something that, you'd love to see happen, you should try and do it, which I think we will.
Valve cracked the cat economy, and you seem to have cracked the internet spaceship's economy. I want to know what goes into creating the perfect spaceship that sometimes you can't even fly yet.
I think it's, well, okay, so I don't particularly have any great science for it, but what I do think, again, is it's sort of, there's the spaceships that represent the possibility of things that you can do is what people respond to and love. It's what I do. So in some ways we sort of focus on, and this is also part of the evolution of the game. So when I first started Star Citizen, I had a much, in the early days before we started the crowdfunding, I had a more sort of traditional narrow view of, okay, well, there'll be these kind of players, and I was thinking it would be more combat focused, and yes, we'd be trading and the other stuff. And as I got into it, and as we were in the early stages of the campaign, and we started to talk to everyone that was backing the game, and we were doing sort of interactive polls to sort of see where people were at, it was quite clear that, straight out combat was not necessarily something that a large part of the people back in the game were interested in. There was things like exploration, and, all sorts of sort of more, people wanted to take a tanker and scoop up gas from a gas giant and then go and sell it to other people that ran out of gas in space. And people wanted to mine, and there's this sense of all these different things you can do in the universe and the possibility of what you can do. And so for us, that's kind of one of the focuses on the ship size. It's like, okay, let's not really sort of try to do these sort of generic jack of all trade ships, but okay, this is the mining ship, this is the exploration ship, or this is the information runner where you're fast and you're stealthy and you're trying to get very valuable information from the outer reaches of the galaxy into the core worlds. And so I think that on the ship front, it's ships that sort of give this sense of a role and an idea that you can play, that people can attach to, and then also the fact that they're rendered and built out in a detail that you feel like you can live and inhabit and spend time on. Because that's what I love. I mean, just the aspect of being able to walk around the ship and use all the different aspects, sit down and, ultimately get a cup of coffee or, take a shower. It's just that sense, because it creates that immersion. It just sort of makes you feel like you're there in the ship, and then if you're out in space, you can sort of project yourself into this, futuristic universe. And I think the people out here are the best people to ask to see what they respond to, but that's my personal response in terms of what I love about the various ships.
We're now going to cut to a live gameplay demo of Star Citizen, which Chris will be walking us through. Shortly afterwards, we'll be taking questions from the audience, so if you have a question or want to start thinking of one, do that now. We will have microphones going around soon. I'll let you know when that starts.
Okay, so probably a lot of you that already have the game have probably seen a lot of this, but so this is, as you know, the very first module that we released was the hangar module, which was the first stage where people could sort of just load up the core engine and walk around and sort of see some of the ships that we'd finished and sort of add the detail. And I think that was one of the aspects that started to make Star Citizen feel real. And obviously we've sort of gone through a fair amount of upgrading, so this is much fancier looking than the hangars did about a year ago. This is the asteroid hangar, and we're using this rendering technology called PBR, which is sort of physically based rendering, so the materials sort of react to light much more like they would do in real life. And then the next module we did, so if I think Travis is going to quickly get into Arena Commander, which is the multiplayer dogfighting or single player dogfighting, and this was one of the original campaign promises that would allow you to do that. Really, this is a great test bed for us to test out various things like balance, control schemes, how the ship system's going to use. Also on the back end technology, how many different players we can support in an instance, how we can optimize the net traffic. So for us, it's really great because when we deliver a new patch, we have hundreds of thousands of people play and download it, and we can sort of really get a good idea of in the field results. And the idea with Arena Commander was that we were going to sort of make it a game within a game. We have a few jokes like original systems instead of origin systems, which was where I used to be a long time ago. So this is sort of like a game inside a game that you can play to practice for when you finally play properly in the game. And I think we're flying around here in Hornet. So this is actually from our new patch, the V09.2, and has a whole bunch of new kind of targeting methods, which I think if we get some new enemies come in. So right now we just targeted an incoming Vandal. Vandal is sort of the bogeyman, the enemy of the United Empire of Earth, which is the sort of Earth government faction. That's where you start inside off.